If you're the parent of a teen or young adult, you are undeniably in one of the busiest stages of life. And it's hard sometimes to figure out how to juggle all the balls while pushing your student along and staying connected. The reality is, there are ways to not have to push, to stay connected, grow closer, and incentivize ownership so that you just become their cheerleader. Jeremy Hill built JB Capital while keeping a healthy marriage and growing closer to his own kids. He's vulnerably going to share where he struggled, where he messed up, and the strategies that helped him succeed. So welcome Jeremy Hill to the show. I think you're going to love this very different conversation, and you're going to get some strategies to grow closer as a family yourself. Jeremy, the show, it is a pleasure to have you.
Morning, Lisa. Great to see you.
So I'm excited because this is not our usual episode, but I think it's going to resonate broadly with our audience. Our listeners are moms and dads who, like you and me, they're busy working and raising families. And some of them might be entrepreneurs like you and I are, and that brings its own special set of challenges. Or, if you're in the C-suite, that does too. But regardless, everybody's feeling the demands on their life when they're busy raising teenagers. And I think that what we're going to talk about is staying connected as a family through raising kids and launching kids is going to be insightful for everybody. So welcome.
It sounds easy when you say it, doesn't it?
I know, exactly. So, we need to hear about your family first, right? So tell us a little bit about your family. Got three kiddos, right?
Yeah. So my wife and I have been together a little bit better than 30 years. We've been married 29 years coming up here in a couple of months. She's normally a tremendous judge of character. Outside of her decision to marry me is still, a little squishy around the edges, but my wife is amazing. So we'll get our 29th wedding anniversary coming up. We got three kids, boy, girl, boy. So as we record this podcast, they are 24, 21, and 18. And a motley crew, just wonderful kids. So my eldest just graduated business school about 6 months ago or so and is out getting his grown up on and doing all that kind of stuff. And my daughter is just finishing her sophomore year in business school and still trying to figure out what grown up looks like.
Yeah.
And then my youngest son, who's just an adjective unto himself, is a junior in high school and getting ready to go into his senior year and, doing all the things that crazy teenage boys do.
Hey, we talk a lot on the show about what does it mean to be a grown up? What does it mean to launch, right? And like you said, like figuring it out. And I watched our kids figure it out, each in their own ways. And it's fun to watch and support them through that.
It
So
is. Yeah,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. No, I was going to say, it is interesting to see your kids grow up and see how it is that their thought patterns change and how their decision making changes and how they start to take a little bit more independence of thought and what it is that they're going to do or be or become or go or all these other kinds of things. And the reality is that all of us, as parents, it is you love on your kids and you want the absolute best for them. And no matter if they're 10 years old or 30 years old, before you go to bed, that's who you're worried about. You're always worried about and
Yeah.
praying about your kids and loving on your kids and hoping the best for them and hoping they figure it out. To a certain degree, though, I think that that's a part of life. It is for everybody. Like I'm 50 years old. Half of the people it is that I know still don't have their shit figured out. I mean, they're
Yeah.
still wrestling with issues and problems and not necessarily trying to be figure out what you want to be when you grow up necessarily, but still going through the life changes it is that says, I don't know if I'm going to go down this path or this path. So, you know, I guess all that goes to show it is that when your kids are 5 years old or whatever it is, or not 5 years old, but 18 years old, give them a little grace. We're all
Yeah.
still figuring it out.
Well, I think, I know one of the things that you're really passionate about is mentorship. And, we had kind of talked about that beforehand, and that's something that's near and dear to you. And like mentoring starts in our own homes, I believe.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
And it doesn't even need to be like a real person. Like I consider some mentors people who I follow, who I voraciously read or listen to everything that they do, right? And one of the things that I was on somebody's YouTube show we just recorded yesterday, and we were talking about this topic of mentorship and launching, and it was really aimed at like kids who are newly graduating from college. So you have one of those, I have one of those. My youngest is the same age as your oldest. And with that, the idea that normalizing, you're still going to feel scared. Even I'm 56. So even in your 50s, you and I can sit here and say like you show up scared. You're still going to have uncertainty. You aren't going to have everything figured out. And to kind of normalize that with others. I mean,
Totally
I'm
agree.
sure that you have had, as I have had, like there's lots of up and downs, especially with recessions and COVID when we're an entrepreneur. And what are some of the greatest lessons, ways that you've been able to teach your own kids that, or even those that you're mentoring?
You know, I think I'm gonna pause there and come back to what it is that you said a minute ago, to where some of your mentors have not necessarily been somebody it is that you sit down with on a one-on-one coaching basis. Like
Yeah,
we'd all, whoever it is that you admire or hope to emulate, from, Tony Robbins to Sarah Blakely to Ed Milet to Kobe Bryant to whoever your person is,
right.
that you look to. More often than not, it is you're not going to be fortunate enough to be able to sit down one on one and break down life and all your problems and stresses. It is, directly with Tony Robbins or whoever it is that you want it to be. But whoever that person is, there can be an extraordinary degree of kind of mentorship and learning and kind of just soaking that in, like you said, through a podcast, through a book, through, the seminar that they go to any of these other kinds of things. It is to be able to capture that for the betterment of yourself and kind of the advancement of your thought. I'm a huge proponent of that. And so I'm just now to a point to where it is that, like, I'm really, really good at the absorption of podcasts and books and all the other stuff it is that everybody does, right? And you can do that till your brain explodes, right? But at
Yeah.
some point, there needs to be some degree of kind of one-on-one fellowship. And I'm interviewing right now coaches for myself. And so I love that aspect of what it is that you're doing. And the world has become so proliferate, or so available of information right now, is that anybody should be like spending time there diving into whatever medium, books or podcasts or audiobooks or whatever you want, to do that kind of stuff. For me and my own kids and how it is that we're guiding, I think a lot of the mentorship or leadership that's effective necessarily, because we've gotten into this world right now, because turn on social media, right? Like everybody's a
Right.
coach, right? And then you have coaches who coach coaches about coaching other coaches about coaching. And you're like, so what do you do? Right? Like,
Right.
so, right? Like, what are you coaching me on if you're a coach who coaches coaches? Like, please be quiet, right?
Exactly.
A lot of the ability it is for you and what it is that you do, Lisa, and what it is that I do, your coaching or your mentorship comes from, candidly, the experiences it is that you've had in life, good and bad, right? And my ability to be able to either transform or lead or guide somebody else is honestly through a lot of the decisions and experiences it is that I've made as a husband and a father and a business person and that kind of things. And I'd love to say it is that you become a better leader or mentor or advisor it is to people by your good experiences, but often we learn more from getting kicked in the teeth and having hard times than we do the good stuff. So my ability it is to lead my kids has become extraordinary. And my wife and I go through this a lot, to where it is that if you everybody loves their kids,
Mhm.
right? That's the easy part. But if you're loving your children without leading your children, you're kind of maybe falling down a little bit as a father. And so the biggest things it is that if I have enough of a relationship it is with my children to be able to lead them through decisions, that's the best way that I can love them. And I think that we've candidly done a pretty good job of that over the last, 8 or 10 years.
I love that. We always talk about like when the childhood brain, the adolescent brain finally fully matures. And, we
When
know
is
this.
that, by the way?
I know exactly. So I need to talk to your wife after this, right? And so as we think about that, we're always told like 25, 26 boys, it's going to be a little bit longer than
Boys, it's about
girls.
50. I think I'm just getting there
Exactly.
now. Yeah.
51, I heard. So there's
Oh,
good
50. Oh,
news
nice.
right on the horizon for
I'll
you.
let
You're
Christine
almost
know.
there.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Good news, right? And so going back to like what you said about staying connected, I remember when my oldest was like, what hill am I going to die on? Right. With some of these things that can happen with teenagers and college
Sure.
students. Right. And they're tough. It's hard to know. And I used to always ping ahead to, well, when he's 26, because I think I did not consciously choose that milestone going like, well, his brain will be mature by then. I think it was a subconscious thing because of the work I
Yeah.
do. And I've worked with this age group for a very long time. And so I would always think to myself, how important is this going to be? And is this worth dying on this hill if it impacts the relationship and the connection and the voice I want to be able to have in his life when he gets there? And it was just like, that was just kind of my thing, always ping too. And then I remember when he turned 26, it dawned on me that I used to always think about that. And I didn't really have to think about that too much in those years, right? As we
Yeah.
got closer to 26, it was less and less that I had to think about like hills to die on and conversations to have that he may not want to have. And then I thought, oh, and we're so positively connected at
I
that.
love
Well,
that.
as he hit that, right? And because it's tough when they're teenagers, you know?
Oh, yeah. Even if you've got great kids, like even if
Yeah,
you don't have the big challenges that you see some families run into with either
right.
drugs or alcohol or pregnancy, or even if it's just normal
That's
teenage,
right.
it's tough.
It is tough. It's a
Yeah.
challenge. And, you know, so as you're doing this and you're talking about like, okay, talking to the kids and being really intentional, and you guys have done a great job staying connected. How much do you share? Because you said some of the greatest lessons we can give as mentors, and I agree with that, is like learn from my mistakes, right? Let me share. I always say let's not always share when it's an open wound, but when we're in the messy middle of it, but like when we've got some healing around it. So, how much do you choose to share and keep to yourself, whether it be your own kids or young adults, maybe that you're mentoring through business and things like that?
Yeah, I think, everybody loves to, talk about, radical candor and that kind of thing. And it, is cool for a hashtag or a meme or something, but there's a degree of discretion that's got to come with that, either for the person, the relationship, the environment, or otherwise. You can't just go on around saying, "Oh my God, you're ugly and you're fat and the world's horrible." And people be like,
Right.
"Oh, I might take offense to that." Probably not the right context.
Yeah.
I think when it comes specifically to our children, one of the things it is that, we found is as they get older, right? Like obviously your relationship changes, but your degree of kind of communication and vulnerability and how much you share with your children is different when they're 10 than when they're 20 than when they're 25 and as they get older, right? That
Right.
relationship changes. The dynamic necessarily of parent and child doesn't change, but it's not necessarily peers, but it's close, right? And so one of the just kind of weirdo impromptu things it is that happen with our family that we never would have thought of or planned or anything else that's been great for about 10 years now is our kids played, premier sports and we traveled and we did all the, psychotic things that you do when you're going to every tournament and,
Yep.
giving blood to pay for whatever next year's dues and all the stuff
Yep.
that you do, right? Joshua and I, my oldest, so I think my wife and I had like a divide and conquer weekend, right? Like she's chasing them over here and
Right.
I'm chasing them over here, right? But Joshua and I were in Las Vegas at the time. We had gone through, we had the game for the day and done the team dinner and done all the stuff that you do. And now it's kind of like, okay, well, it's, 8 or 9 o'clock and we don't have a game early in the morning. And I'm not tired. Are you tired? No, I'm not tired. Are you tired? Are you tired? No. Okay. Well, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? Right. It was kind of like that. We're sitting here and you don't want to like go hang out with your
Well,
kid for
that's a really unfamiliar feeling of like, I don't have something to do.
totally, right? But we're stuck in a hotel room in Vegas. And I was like, well, let's play the questions game. And he goes, okay, what's the questions game? I was like, I don't know. I'm making it up as we go. And he's like, okay. And I was like, I can ask you any 5 questions it is that I want. You can ask me any 5 questions it is that you want. There is nothing off limits. You have to 100% tell the truth, and nothing ever leaves this room. Are you in?
Wow.
And Joshua was 16 or 17 at the time, and you see that little cheeky smile, like, I want to say yes, but I'm scared,
Yeah.
right? Kind of a
Yeah.
thing. And so ultimately it was, yeah, let's do it. And so, your first questions are, okay, well, what's your biggest mistake? Or what are you scared of? Or what are you, whatever it is. And then it's like, hey, have you ever cheated on mom?
Wow.
Have you ever, done it right? Like just on and on and on. And 5 questions turned into 20. And then it was like, that was cool. Let's go for a walk. But what that did is it allowed me to get to know Joshua as Joshua and not Joshua as my son. And it allowed him to get to know me as a Jeremy and not me as his dad. Because, Joshua and Kaylin and Tristan, they're my children, and my wife and I will do anything it is that we can for them. But you also learn the fact it is that your child is still an individual as well as being your child. And so how do you get to know them there from a more personal level? And so that kind of manifested into something it is that we started to play as a family and started to go on, and it just has turned into something really cool.
It sounds like I mean, we do a conversation queue in our newsletter every week,
Okay.
and ours is a little bit more. So that's when we send out the podcast episode to our listeners, and it's more centered on having intentional conversations around future planning and supporting them,
Mhm.
but helping build self awareness in your child, regardless of how old they are. Those types of questions, different, but still taking advantage of those times to have those deep conversations. Okay, so the 5 questions game that or the
Yeah.
100 questions or whatever. So, what age do you think that that's appropriate to do?
I think you can do it at any age, but I think the depth of the questions change,
Yeah.
right? Like if when and so we started that and it kind of did cool. And then we did for the family. And then I would do like little dates with my kids to where it would just be me and my daughter, and we'd go get a cup of coffee or go get ice cream and we'd play. Well, the
Mhm.
questions it is that I'd ask her or she'd ask me were different. She was, 3 years younger than my son at the time, right? And so
Right.
her mind works different. She thinks different. She asks different questions. And then my younger son the same. But as they've gotten older and now are 24, 21, and whatever, like the questions are a little bit more pure. And,
Yeah.
I think that you can probably play at any age-ish. By the way, this is not, this is going to be a board game available at your
Right.
local, right?
And
Like it's
now
not,
that's what we're introducing. So
it's
this is a
nothing like that.
DIY, my friends.
Totally, totally. But I think the idea of just really allowing your family to get to know the individual behind the role of husband, father, mother,
Right.
son, whatever it is, unconsciously turned out to be really cool. And now my kids are playing that with their friends. My daughter's got a serious boyfriend.
You're
He knows,
like, let me play that with
oh
your
yeah.
boyfriend.
That's like, no, and we have.
Yeah.
And we have, right? And it's just that for us for some reason has just turned out to be a really cool little thing. So
So it reminds me of, and this goes back to my second podcast episode ever, which this episode's, we don't pre-plan what number they're going to be, but you'll be like in the 180s. Okay.
okay,
So
awesome.
podcast number 2 was the author of How to Raise an Adult. And she was a former dean of freshman students at Stanford. And she saw that a lot of parents were not raising an adult, they were raising children.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
And it's a fantastic book that she wrote. But that kind of goes along with the idea of seeing your child as an individual, seeing them
Mhm.
as an adult, right? You're raising an adult, you're raising an individual. They're going to have their own set of values. We need to validate that. They don't need to be a mirror of you. So I love that idea of the question game. So I heard in there, like, it was very rare that I think this is universal that you're looking at each other in this Vegas room waiting for the game tomorrow or whatever, and you're like, oh my gosh, we don't have anything to do right now.
Right.
And life is so busy. So as a very successful entrepreneur, and I know some of our people have seen you on CNBC and Bloomberg and all the things, and a lot of demands on your time for someone who's been very successful. How do you make time for the connected family that you've built?
And
Like, what are some strategies? If you could go back, like, let's say we have a listener who their oldest is a freshman or sophomore and they've got multiple kids after that, like you and I had. What advice would you give them?
I've done an exceptional job of that of late, of late meaning the last 10 years. But
Mhm.
if we've been married 30 and my kids are 25, that means for 15, I kind of screwed things up.
Yeah.
So everybody falls victim of the fact of the guilt factor from job and professional life versus kids. And if I work too much, I'm not there for my kids. And if I'm at every baseball game and all this kind of stuff, then I'm not performing at my job. And I'm failing one way or another, just depending upon how things go. The simplest way I think it is to look at that is that idea of the big rocks, right? Like we've all heard the example of the professor it is that has the rocks and the little rocks and the little rocks and the sands and the water and this kind of a thing. And so we constantly go back to that for not only our own lives, but as we're kind of coaching and guiding and leading our kids, is that there is room for everything so long as your priorities are in line. Right. When we've gone through this with our kids when they have girlfriends and soccer and kids in school and homework and you still got stuff with the family and your brother and sister and going to church and on and on and on. And it's like this big plate of spaghetti of life and you're kind of trying to figure things out. And the constant reminder is going back to, okay, what are the two or three things it is that are the most important? I know you love your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whatever it is. I know you love soccer and your friends are really cool and blah, 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 and all this other kind of thing. But it comes down first it is to the cornerstones of what it is that our standards are as a family, which is you got to make sure it is that your faith is right. And so I don't care if you were late last night or you have lots of homework, we're still going to hold hands and pray over dinner, and we're still going to go to church on Sunday, and we're still going to make sure that, our family's thinking the right way this week, right? And so that's there. And then our family dynamic of what's going on there. And then your commitments it is to school, when they're in that kind of
Well,
teenage.
school's their job, right?
Yeah, school is your job, right? As a teenager, right? And once the core of those kind of three big rocks are there, of course you got time for your boyfriend or girlfriend or your buddies or your friends or your party or your soccer or whatever it is, right? And then you have all that kind of stuff. And then, well, I want to play video games. Well, cool, you can play. I don't care. You want to play Xbox and Call of Duty and, shoot the bad guys and all the stuff you want to do? Cool. Do that. So long as it's in kind of the priority and the pecking order of what's important. And so I think for the kids really is going back to those kind of big rocks things. The same thing true for us as, parents, right? I mean, every day I have a little bit of guilt of something before I go to bed about, I could have been more patient here. I could have maybe been more loving here. I could have, instead of taking 5 minutes to handle this, I could have taken 10 minutes to do this with the kids or one thing or another. And a part of me goes back to, the best of the best of the best, whether it was, Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant, it's definitely
Mhm.
not LeBron, but it's Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant. Like, they miss some shots too, right? Like you're not going to be perfect, and you need to allow yourself a little bit of grace to not be perfect. So,
That is a great piece of advice to end on. Like, be gentle with yourself,
yeah,
right? Yeah. Well, this has been fantastic.
I
Thanks
enjoyed
for,
it. Thanks.
yeah, thanks for exploring family and raising kids and balancing it all. It sounds like you guys have a beautiful family.
We do. Thank God for my wife. So
Well, tell her we said thank you.
I will absolutely do so.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Enjoyed it. Thanks, Lisa.